Hello, nurses. This is Dr. Sadie, and I am doing the voiceover for Journal Club article number 8, Increasing Testicular Self-Examination in Active Duty Soldiers and Intervention Study. I think this is a really interesting study because I first thought, well, anytime we are looking at Army, Navy, active duty soldiers, we had to think about their rights. Were their rights respected? Did they do all the right things when it came to um, having autonomy, having informed consent? Did they make sure that the soldiers felt that they could say no? So that's the first thing that I think about when I see something on soldiers. Because remember, there's a real a power interesting about this kind of study. So that was interesting to me. And that then so we're going to look for that in our heads. And then this is just a really cool study because who is more at risk than these 18 to 30-year-old guys? So we know that this is an important study to do. So let's talk about the research problem. So and I highlighted it here, yet one element of health maintenance is strikingly absent, educating men about testicular cancer and testicular self-examination. So that is absent. They talk about in the literature review how this is a killer of young men, yet we don't talk about it. And even towards the end, they talk about how most young men never have a doctor who examines them, which I find fascinating because women get breast self exams all the time, but we skip over testicular exam as practitioners. I don't understand that. Here we go. Okay, so describe the purpose, and so we're just going to kind of skip by the literature review, and we're going to go down to the specific aims. So the purpose of the study is to determine which two feasible, widely implementable educational programs based on the health belief model. So you should have learned about the health belief model already, and that is, remember, a lot about self-efficacy and feeling that they are at risk. And I picked this article also because it had a conceptual framework. And remember, as consumers of research, we love to see a conceptual model because that's something that is tried and true. We know that it has a lot of validity. So whenever you base your study on a theory like Newman, base it on a conceptual model like the health belief model, it adds an amazing amount of validity to what you're doing, because if you really truly base it on the model, then you're going to have a good start, a really solid foundation. All right, so then the specific aim. So really, what are they trying to do? So they didn't really put a research question or hypothesis. They gave us specific aims. And so they have 5 specific aims. 4. Okay, they have assess the knowledge of the health beliefs regarding testicular cancer and testicular self-exam in active duty soldiers. That's number 1. They want to know what they know. Identify the proportion of active duty soldiers who are practiced monthly testicular self-exam. They want to evaluate the effects of the interventions on the knowledge of the health beliefs regarding testicular cancer and testicular self-exam. So they want to know the effects of their interventions. They're going to be, remember, they're doing educational interventions. And D, identify the monthly performance rate of testicular self-exam in active duty soldiers related to each intervention. So how did the intervention work, and did it make an impact enough that these soldiers are going to do self-testicular exam? I think I highlighted up here that this is I think of 18 to 30. They're saying 20 to 35 are the high risk age groups. So this we want to make an impact today, and for them to keep doing this the next couple decades of their life. This article gives an amazing breakdown of the health belief model. And actually, I'm going to use some of this in my 235 class, because this is really, they did a really succinct way of talking about the health belief model. But remember that we have to think about these factors. So they have them here, and this is going to highlight as soon as I lift up. I can't get the highlight off for some reason. I'm technologically not working out today. So perceived susceptibility, perceived severity, perceived benefits. So do they think they're going to get it? Are they thinking this is severe enough to worry about? Perceived benefits, what's in it for me? Perceived barriers, what would keep them? Remember, a barrier keeps them from doing it. Self-efficacy, do they feel like they can? So these are all big parts of the health belief model, and they explain it very well here. All right, so the next thing we're worried about is what makes this problem easy or hard to study. So it would be, this is education, right? But we're talking about testicles. So there's already a weirdness factor there for, I think, a lot of these young men. Although they talk about their junk probably all the time, they don't really talk about it in these kind of terms. So what I think makes it easy to study is that it's education. You either know it or you don't, right? But I think what makes it hard to study is there's a lot of people who aren't comfortable talking about their bodies in this kind of factor. I think if they were talking about their testicles to their friends, of course we wouldn't say the word testicles. We would, I taught high school for over 5 years, and I never heard a young man say that in that way. We know that this is not usually the venue, and then we ask them to touch themselves, although we know they touch themselves. We don't know, but we would suspect they would do that anyways. But now they don't want to make it seem like they are touching themselves anyway. So I think this is I think they hit a difficult subject. I think young men are always worried about appearing like talking about testicles makes them seem less masculine. I think this is a tough one to study, although it's about knowledge, and either you know it or you don't. I think they've touched on some interesting social cultural points. They also have these perceived. They're looking at these perceived benefits, perceived severity, and perceived susceptibility. So there is some psychosocial components to their survey, and so it's not just knowledge based. So I think they picked a hard one in which to study. All right. Next, variables. Oh, all right. So this is an interventional study. So I hope that you picked that this was a, they did do an experimental study. They did have a control group. They do have an intervention. So our intervention is testicular cancer education. Our dependent variable are all these parts of the health belief model. So it's perceived susceptibility, perceived benefits, perceived severity, self-efficacy, and then did they do it or not, and also their educational, did they perform it, do they know how to perform it, the barrier. So I think that we have an amazingly tight intervention. I think they did a really good job shaping their independent variable, and our dependent variables are all based on the health belief model. Extraneous variables, I think that they don't have very many here. I think they took away the variable with their commanding officers and feeling like they had to. So I thought maybe that might be an extraneous variable, and anxiety about having to do this study. If they didn't want to, they took away that. But I really couldn't think of very many extraneous variables because it's about education, it's about body. I don't know. I couldn't come up with very many. How are the variables relevant to the problem? Well, we know that all of these, perceived susceptibility, perceived severity, benefits, perceived barriers, cues to action, self-efficacy, and doing the exam, all have to do with testicular cancer. So I think they all relate back to their aims, and they all relate back to this health belief model. So let's talk about the review of literature. They do an amazing job with their review of literature. It's very succinct. They talk about who's at risk, and this is their population. They talk about that a delay in diagnosis may equate to higher morbidity and mortality for the soldier, as well as increased healthcare costs and loss to military manpower and costs. So they are at risk for this, and that if a delay in diagnosis does affect their long-term mortality and their morbidity. They talk about how these neoplasms are rapidly growing, they metastasize, and they really do. This is not like prostate cancer that sits in the prostate for a long time. Testicular cancer is definitely on the move. All right, so they did a good job with their literature review, and they really did support the need for the study. Describe the research design. All right, so we talked about this already being a quantitative intervention study. So this is an experimental study. They have and they have a 3-group design. So they're testing 3 different groups. They're doing 3 different interventions. One's getting the shower card and pamphlets. One's getting an educational video and a shower cards, and one's getting learn how to run better. So I think that's interesting. Hopefully, I didn't read, but hopefully they went back after and they taught that how to run group about testicular cancer. Okay, so how do they get their sample? So this is definitely a convenient sample on a military base, and there isn't a lot of variability, of course, in that sample. But let's think about these guys. These guys are from all over the country, all over the world, right? And they're on this base. So what's interesting, it is just one place in one setting, but it isn't just one group of people. These participants are from all over. So I know that it says right here, it's a convenient sample of active duty male soldiers assigned to 3 military companies. But we can't just say that these are just a group of people like if we were doing this at a high school in South Carolina. That's much more likely to say that this is a group of South Carolinians, born and bred, have been here forever. But this is a diverse sample. It really, really is, even though it's a convenient sample, even though it is a sample from one place. So I feel really good about their sample, and I thought, wow, what an interesting thought to, when you go in and you're gonna get a sample of, you need young men and you want diversity, it doesn't get much more diverse than this. Anyway, there's some insights on that. And sample characteristics. So we need to go down, way far down. Okay, so we have the sample was 23 years old. A majority of listed were enlisted. Caucasian, 70%, not married, 64%, without children, 67%, had high school education or equivalent, 54%. So this is, when we look at this, we know this looks like it's a mostly white, single, male, and a little undereducated. So a majority have high school education or equivalent, but we still have 45% that are out there and which do not. So I think they also go down, they talk a little bit more about, I'm going to pause because I think there was a little bit more about sample. Oh my, it's right in front of my eyes. So here's overall sample characteristics. So I knew I saw something. So this is, here's the mostly Caucasian, 19% African American, 3% Hispanic, 2% Asian, enlisted and officer. So there's an overwhelming enlisted, mostly not married. 4 children. One has 4 children. Oh my gosh. High school graduate equivalent, 54%. Some college. Oh, 33%. So this is a little bit better educated than what the